Hey, welcome back to the Two Car Garage. I'm Lucas. This is Curt's Bug, and well, we've got a bit of an update for you today, and really it revolves around getting the heat working in this thing. On the last video here, we kind of went through and got the brackets all welded in for the rear air ride, and well, the last couple of days I've been trying to figure out how to get the heat to work, and well, it's not completely 100% done, but I do have things figured out, and now it's just a matter of kind of going through and putting the finishing touches on it. I figured now would be a good time to, well, show you what it is I figured out. Now, if you're thinking about putting this air ride in your Bug, and specifically the air-cooled kit, just know that you're going to have some work ahead of you. Now, when I talked to Air Cooled and asked them if heat is still something that could be used on this, they said yes with a little bit of modification. Well, let me tell you what, it was a lot of modification. First things first, let's just quickly talk about how the heat works on a Bug, just in case somebody's watching who's not familiar with it. So the hot air coming off of the exhaust manifold goes through a heater box that originally connects to one of these flexible tubes here, and then this then connects to a tube in the body, and then that's blowing hot air into the car. Now this tube is no longer usable with this kit because it comes off of the heater box, and then the airbag is right where this is supposed to be. So this I could not use. What we ended up doing is I found a ductwork for, well, I guess race cars, I guess. It's just a fiberglass duct with a silicone wrap, and we're going to use that to connect the heat box to the tube in the body. And again, it's not a straight shot. When I get you up in the car, you're going to see that we had to re-angle the tube in the body to go around the airbag, and then it goes under and then back up to get to the heater box. It's kind of a weird way of getting there, but it's going to be effective. With the ducting figured out, I went ahead and modified the tube in the body. Again, it originally kind of stuck essentially straight out, and it comes right into the brackets that hold the airbag in place. And so I had to cut and re-angle the air duct to be pointing towards the center of the car and down a little bit so I could bring the tube down and around the airbag. Once we got that all sorted, then I went and looked at the heater box. I put the engine back in the car, installed the heater box, dropped the car to full drop, and before I got there, the axle actually hits the heater box. So I had to modify the heater box as well. Now that is not specific to this kit. That's really going to be any vehicle that you're going to be dropping, any Volkswagen that you're going to be dropping. And once you get to full laid out position, you can run into a problem. So we had to modify the air box as well. It was a little bit of work, but you know, it is what it is. So now that I've kind of given you a rough idea of what it is that we did here, let's get up close to the car here, and I'll kind of show you what's going on. We'll look at the air box. I'll show you where things connect in there, and then I'll go ahead and pull it out and show you the modifications done to that. And then I'll try to get you under the car so you can see where the tube is coming out of the body. So let's take an up close and personal look here. All right, well here we are up close and personal here, and you can see here's our heat box. So again, it just draws heat off of the exhaust here. Air blows through, comes up and goes through the tube. Now if you look right here, you'll see the 1.5 inches of material I had to add in order to raise this tube up high enough to clear the axle. Now right now the axle is dropped all the way down, so this would be its furthest away point. But if I go ahead and raise this guy up, and I'm going to put you back here just a little bit so you can see past the brake drum. As I bring the axle up, you can see it getting closer and closer to the tube. And now I'm going to bring that up to the point of Right there is when the car will be at its lowest point, and you can see I have basically about a finger's width between the axle and the tube. And that's going to be plenty because we won't be driving the car with it this low, but we want to make sure that we're not going to have any issues here. Now, I do not have new motor mounts in here, so I have a feeling that once I replace those, it will actually raise the engine just a little bit. But being that things are worn out right now, I wanted to make sure I had clearance here because in the future it should only raise up when I put the new ones on there. Now, if I reposition you just a little bit here, I'm gonna show you what's going on underneath. All right, now from this angle, you can kind of better see what's going on. I know it's not great because we've got stuff in the way, but you'll kind of get an idea. So we've got our ductwork here, comes off of the heat box and immediately points downhill. You can see it down here. And this is where it will go under the bracketry and around the airbag, and then it'll hook up to the tube. Now, right now, I know it looks like it's hanging real low. I simply don't have the tube trimmed back to the proper length just yet. We're going to do that once we go to assemble the car. But right now, at least we've got the general shape figured out here. Once we get everything adjusted to the right length, we'll get it clamped down to the heater box, we'll get it clamped down to the body, and then I'm going to put a couple of clamps down on the lower end here to actually hold it to the chassis, just so it doesn't end up dragging and hitting anything on the ground. Now that you've seen what's going on here, I'm going to take you under the car. And, well, we'll give you the best view we can as far as what's going on with the tubes coming out of the body. All right, well, let's take a look at this from under the car now. So I went ahead and removed the ductwork here, just so I can show you some of our obstacles. So the duct comes out, and the first thing that we showed you earlier, here's our axle tube. But then if I drop down a little bit, you can see here's our bracketry for the airbag, and in fact I have the airbag and the lower control arm installed, and the original tube would have come straight through here, and you can see the airbag is right in the way, and directly behind this bracket there was a tube that stuck out of the body. So what we're doing here, the tube's going to come down and it's going to come in, and if I can get you up in here, it's basically going to thread this space right here between the airbag and this bracket. And then, you know, this is the emergency brake cable, which we'll probably have to make sure that that's, you know, in a position where it's not going to contact. But then the tube is going to be pinched right up against this rail here. So it's going to come down right underneath here, and then it's going to come right up in this little space here between the airbag and the frame horn. Now, let's move over a little bit, and you can see right here, this is actually the tube that goes into the body. And if I get around just a little bit, if I can, you can see that I've got about almost 3/4 of an inch of space between this tube and the airbag. And that's about as far back as I could get it and still make things work. Up here, this is the bracket that the lower control arm is attached to. We ended up having to notch that, again, just to have clearance here. And, well, it's going to work. Everything's really tight, but I've run the suspension through its range of travel to make sure that it's not going to contact the heat duct. And, well, we're going to just make it. So again, we'll get the ducting on here. I'll get it clamped down. It'll sneak back, and we'll end up putting a couple clamps on this little bracket here on the frame horn, just to hold the tube in place. And then it'll sneak around this bracket, up around the axle tube, and then up onto the heat box. Well, now that you've kind of seen the direction that things are all routed here, I know you can't see what's up against the body real good. I'm going to do a separate video on that once I get the chassis pulled back out. So here's what we ended up using to make all this work. For the tube in the body, I opted to go with a 2.5-inch diameter tube because that's actually really close to what the tube diameter on the body already is. I looked, and the silicone tube, this fiberglass silicone tube that we're using, I could have gotten this in 2-inch or 2.5-inch, and I opted to go with the larger, just simply because I wanted the larger tube connected to the body because it has to make a pretty sharp corner, and I didn't want to lose too much air volume. So I figured if I started with the bigger tube, we'd have a better shot of having a somewhat smooth transition with the airflow. So this is just some 2.5-inch exhaust pipe that was left over from another project of mine, and so we just cut a chunk of this, got the angles figured out and adjusted right, and that's what's welded into the body. The heat ducting, like I said, this is I just picked this up on Amazon, and I'll go ahead and throw a link in the description to it if you're interested in it. But it's a pretty high heat rated product used for like ducting on brake cooling and such. And because we are using this for heat, I wanted something that would be able to withstand that. But 2.5-inch tube slips right over top of my 2.5-inch exhaust tube and works out real well. Now, where this connects to the heater box here, this tube here is actually just slightly under 2.5-inch. In fact, if I take my exhaust pipe and slide that over, you can see that it just fits. Now, it won't slide on right now because there's a bit of a burr where it was cut off, but this will just slide over top of that. The ductwork itself, if I slide this on here, let me get my reducer out of there. If I slide this on here, it's actually really loose. What I've done to make up for that is I just simply took a piece of this 2.5-inch exhaust and I cut a slot in it. So now when I slide this over, my ductwork will slide over that, and then the slot in here, so when I clamp this down, it'll actually pinch tight to the exhaust. So that's our setup here. Again, 2.5-inch exhaust tubing used for the connection here and for the connection to the body, and then some fiberglass ducting hose that allows me to, again, connect to the tube on the body, move around the airbag, and then up to the heater box. It's a little convoluted, but I think once everything's in place, everything's clamped down, and I get a couple straps to hold this up tight to the frame horn, I think it's going to be quite effective. Now, the last thing we're going to do, and I'm not going to do this until I actually install this in the car at the end, is I'm going to buy some insulating blanket, just some heat shield type blanket that you'd wrap like starters or firewalls or something with, just to block heat. And I'm actually going to get this installed in the car, and then I'm going to wrap this tube in an insulating blanket. And really that's for two reasons. One, I've noticed that the silicone that covers this tube is really, really thin, and it doesn't take much to abrade and wear through that. So I want to make sure I don't damage that. But two, I actually want to contain the heat in this. It's not going to do a whole lot. If we look at the original one, this is a pretty large diameter tube, and this is just all insulation here. So it's going to kind of mimic that. But really, I want the heat to not be lost through the tube itself. And like I said, I'm not worried about that right now. That'll be done at the end. So when I install this on the freshly painted chassis, then we'll wrap this in the insulating blanket, put a couple of stainless steel zip ties on here to hold that blanket in place, and again, it'll protect the tube from any kind of abrasion, as well as keep the heat in this so it'll just go through and into the car. So I mentioned that we had to raise this up. This is an 1.5-inch spacer. So what I did, you'll notice that the top of it's missing. this piece right here clips on there, and this is just to redirect the air. So if I'm not using heat, as the air is blowing through the exhaust, it just exits out here, so you don't have hot, stale air collecting in here. And then when you activate the heat itself, it's got a little flapper valve that'll close off that hole, direct all the heat out. Now this guy is just, you can see these little tabs here. When I slide this in place, these little tabs were just bent over, pinching that in place, and that's what holds it together. With that, there were a couple of places that had some tack welds. So what I did is I went ahead and bent up all the tabs, found where the tack welds were and cut those free, and just peeled this guy off. This I don't need right now. With that off of there, I was then able to come in and find the spot where I could slice this. And I wanted to be able to just raise it straight up without having to worry about running into anything else. So I just simply found my spot, sliced across the front of this, and it was really just this half that I cut through. And then from there, I was able to fashion my riser plate. And it's just some sheet metal. I think it's like 18 gauge sheet metal that I had to raise this up, and then I got everything tacked in place, test fit on the car, made sure everything was, well, the way I wanted it. Once I got everything positioned correctly, then we went ahead and finished welded the spacer in place. Once I got that done, then you'll see there's another plate on the back here, and that was to fill this hole between this top cover and the rest of the heat tube. So now this is just raising that up, and you can see I've got some shape into that to make sure everything is going to be good. And now everything's been finished welded. I know it's not going to leak, and all I have to do is reinstall this cover plate, bend these tabs back around, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to weld this in a few spots just to make sure things are strong. And also, if there's any areas where there's going to be too much air leakage, we'll probably just kind of tack those shut as well, just to make sure this is good and strong. I'm going to hold off on this for right now because I want to go ahead and clean up this exhaust manifold. I'm going to probably sandblast most of it, just to give me a good surface to then repaint it. And I want to leave this open just so I can clean out any sand that gets blown into it. Once everything is clean, this is clean, then we'll go ahead, slap this together, and we'll get it painted up. Now the last thing that needs to be done to this control box here is actually for the heat lever. Now this heat lever is actually for the left side of the car, for the driver's side, but you'll get an idea here. So this is supposed to hook on that arm, and then that's what controls the heater valve. The original pin, you can see this, I got this little bracket welded in here. The original pin was right basically in the center of this bracket here, and this guy would have been right here. And now you can see that because I raised this up 1.5 inches, it no longer contacts. So what we're going to do is I'm just simply going to drill a hole through this little bracket. You can see that there's a big space here between the bracket and the actual heat tube here. And I'm just going to put a pin in there that goes through the tube, touches the heater box, and then I'll weld it to the heater box, weld it to the tube, and that's going to reposition this up high enough to now be able to activate the valve. I haven't done that yet because I don't have the brackets I'm going to be using. These little levers here, I've got one. It's kind of a universal for the left and right. It's not in real good shape. The one that actually is on the right side, this one's in really bad shape. The pivot's all worn out, and I just not real crazy about this one. So instead of fitting it to this or the one from the left side, I just ordered new ones. They haven't arrived yet. I imagine they'll probably be here sometime in the next couple of days. But then I'll use those to figure out the final position for this pin. Then we can get it drilled and get the new stud welded in. Once we have that done, then this guy is basically ready to go. So that's that's the modifications that were done to this heater box. I have not done the driver side yet. That's going to be the next one we're going to do. And so when we get to doing that one, I'll actually show more of what's going on. So in the next video, what we'll do is we'll show you the tubes coming out of the body so you can actually see the shaping that went into that. So we'll get the chassis down, pushed out of the way so you can see those. We'll also get the driver's side manifold cut up and raised and get everything positioned, and then you'll kind of get to see the whole package. I really just wanted to show you where things are and really what it takes to maintain heat if you're going to be running one of these air ride kits. So now, hopefully that gives you an idea of what it took for us to maintain the heat in this car while running this air ride suspension. I imagine most people that are running air ride in a car like this are going to have a pretty nice car, probably not running it around in cold weather. And so heat is oftentimes just deleted and it's not used. In this case, we know that this car is going to be run around in evenings in an area where it does get cool. So we wanted to make sure the heat still worked. So we have to go through all these steps in order to make that happen. So just keep it in mind. If you're looking to lower your bug, you're going to have to at least modify the heat exchanger to a degree, depending on how low you're dropping it. If you're going to be running on air ride and you're going to be dropping the car all the way to the ground, you for sure will need to modify the heater box. If you're going to be running at least this particular air ride kit, you have to modify the tubes in the body because, again, the bracket was right here that holds the airbag, and the tube came out and basically ran right into it. So it was just direct like that. So you're going to have to cut that tube and modify it to get it to go around. And then, like I said, this silicone tube just seemed to be the best bet for me, at least in this situation. It's a fiberglass tube that's covered in silicone, so it should be plenty durable for what we're doing, and it's plenty flexible to get me around all the things I need to get me around. So that's the solution that I came up with. Is there a better solution? Maybe. Let me know in the comments if you would have done something different, because like I said, this is kind of the best that I could come up with, at least over the past couple of days. And maybe there's something better. And I'll tell you what, if I see some better ideas that are better than what I've done here, I'm not opposed to changing direction. But for now, this is what we got. So that's it. That's what I know. I know there wasn't any work going on here today. Honestly, it's because I had so much going on. I just left the camera off and I just did it to get it done. Now that I've got a pretty good plan, the next video I'll show you some of the work and again more of what's going on, so you can see a little better once stuff is out of the way. So hopefully you got something out of it. Let me know what you think, and well, really, until the next one, I'll see you around.